Hi everyone, welcome to SBS 304 Research Methods Lab Video for Exercise 2. So I'm going to talk you through the lab exercise 2 and just tell you what I'm looking for. This should help you complete the lab exercise and make a grade you're happy with. So the first question, I want you to restate your research question. If you got good feedback on your research question from exercise 1, it's okay to just totally copy and paste it. If you want to refine your research question based on what I talked to you about related to exercise 1, it's okay to state a refined or updated research question. But what I'm ultimately looking for is some version of the same research question you had in the first exercise. Notice that for the rest of the questions, I have some italicized terms. All these italicized terms are terms you should encounter in your textbook and see defined there for you. So if you're having trouble understanding what these terms mean or exactly what I'm looking for, check out Chapter 6 in your textbook and look in the little insets at some of the vocabulary words. So the second question asks, what is the target population for your research question? The target population is the group you want to be able to generalize to. So if your sample is a subset of your target population, then your target population is who you want your sample to represent. So if I wanted to survey students at Birmingham Southern College, I would draw a sample of about 100 students, which would be about 10% of the population, a little less. But my target population would be students at Birmingham Southern College. The third question is, how will you construct a sampling frame for your target population? So your sampling frame is just a list of all the members of your target population. Ideally, a sampling frame is a complete list. So if I wanted to study students at Birmingham Southern College, I would contact the academic records office and request a list of all enrolled students. And then I would randomly select 100 students. But my sampling frame would be that list of all enrolled students. So will my sampling frame be complete? In the case of Birmingham Southern College students and a list of all enrolled students, yes, that would be a complete sampling frame. But let's say I wanted to study all residents of Jefferson County. How would I do that? Well, I could go to the Jefferson County, tax office, I suppose, and ask for a list of all homeowners. Would that be a complete sampling frame of all the residents of Jefferson County? No, I'm excluding renters. I'm also excluding people who don't have houses. What if I ask for a list? What if I got census records and managed to get the Census Bureau to give me a list of all the people in Jefferson County who answered the census? Would that be a complete sampling frame? It's as complete a sampling frame as I'm likely to achieve, but it still wouldn't be complete because I would be missing people who didn't answer the census. Now, if you have an incomplete sampling frame, it's important to consider exactly who will be left out. So in the case of census, in the case of people who answered the census or didn't answer the census, am I creating systematic error? Remember in lecture 4, we talked about systematic error being error that's more likely to affect some groups than others. So if my sampling frame is incomplete, am I leaving out some groups and not others? Possibly. If you think of how the census counts people, they mail something to your house, they email you, and they knock on your door if you don't respond. So people who don't have email or access to computers, people who don't have a house, and people who may not answer the door. Well, those are more likely to be people who are otherwise disadvantaged. Maybe people who are homeless. Maybe people who live in poverty. Maybe people who don't trust the government. Those are people who are less likely to fill out the census. So my census-based sampling frame might create some systematic bias. And that's really what I'm getting at with this question. If your sampling frame is incomplete, who is it leaving out, and how is that creating bias in your study? Question 4 asks how many elements you will sample from your population, or in other words, what is your sample size? An element is just one member of your population, whatever your population is made up of. Now here's where unit of analysis becomes really important. If I'm studying students at Birmingham Southern College, my unit of analysis is students. If I'm using the census to look for all residents of Jefferson County, I have a unit of analysis problem. Because you see, the census doesn't count individuals, it counts households, and then asks how many people are in that household. So I could go from a census response, which represents a household, and count how many individuals there are, but I'm not really sampling individuals, I'm sampling households. So unit of analysis is very important to keep in mind when you think about how many elements you'll sample from your population. It's important to know whether you're really getting the number of things that you think you're getting. In 1 to 3 sentences, I want you to explain how you've arrived at the sample size that you've chosen. So in other words, if you want to sample 100 students from Birmingham Southern College, why 100? Well, for me, I think that 10% of the student body is a pretty big sample and is big enough to be representative based on what it tells me in the textbook. But maybe I'm not using a random sample or trying to generalize my sample to a larger population. Maybe I'm trying to research international students at Birmingham Southern College. And since there are only about 14 international students, I want to interview all of them. So in that case, I'm actually interviewing a population and not a sample. So if you have a sample size that's much larger, you need to explain why you've chosen that. Another example might be if I wanted to research students who speak Spanish as a first language at Birmingham Southern College. There may be 50 to 100 such students, let's just say, who speak Spanish either as a first language or bilingually. If there are 50 to 100 students who speak Spanish fluently or bilingually or as a first language, interviewing 5 students doesn't really tell me very much. I'm not capturing the diversity of that population. Instead, I might want to interview, say, 30 of them. That's not the entire population, but it's a very large sample. So I just want you to tell me what your rationale is. Why are you choosing the number of elements that you're choosing? Finally, I want you to tell me about your sampling strategy. Will you use a true random sample? Will you use some kind of pseudo-random sample? Will you use stratified sampling, where you try to use quotas to select a certain number of people from a number of categories? Will you not use sampling at all and try to interview the entire population? Or will you use a convenience sample where you know that your sample might not be representative, but you're just going to go with whoever responds to your survey or whoever responds to your recruitment? I want you to explain why you've chosen the sampling strategy you have and why you think it's appropriate. I've asked for 1 to 3 sentences, but you might want to tell me a little bit about how you think this will affect your research. That will help you think through how your sampling strategy is likely to impact your results, which will help you when you're ultimately doing your research. So I want to encourage you to use this lab exercise to plan your research and to think through what you're trying to achieve, not just to answer the questions to get the points. The points will come, If you meet the criteria and answer all the questions completely, you'll get a good grade. But the goal of these assignments is to help you plan your research. So I hope you'll take the opportunity to really think through your sampling strategy here. Um, Please submit this by next Wednesday in the submission folder, and I will give you feedback by the following Monday.